Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kiro Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kiro Whitey.
And today we're talking with Carrlos Boyd, who will be telling us about his time with OneShare Health. So welcome, Carrlos.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And for our audience, we appreciate you sacrificing some time to speak with us today whilst the Cowboys are on. Obviously, we can see you're supporting the Polo, so fingers crossed for a Cowboys win.
Yeah, we them boys.
All right, Carlos. Can you start by just giving us a bit of an intro about your background in the tech space and high-level background on OneShare Health for us?
Sure. So I've been in Salesforce atmosphere or the Salesforce ecosystem for maybe 11, 12 years, 13 years, I think. Started out as an admin and kind of moved my way up from there. While I was at OneShare, I was director of CRM technology and kind of ran the Salesforce installation there. Kind of built it out from scratch. Had a team built that worked with me. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a background on me. As far as OneShare Health, if anyone is familiar with kind of health share companies, they do something similar to health insurance, providing payments to healthcare providers for different services and stuff. It's a little bit different from insurance. There's slightly different rules that are involved, but it fills a gap in the market.
So one of the big differences, my understanding, is I guess it's called a health share. Is that the technical term?
Yeah.
Health share, yeah. Is that you guys are a nonprofit, right?
So it's a nonprofit. I'm not with them anymore.
Right.
But yeah, it is a nonprofit. There are some, like I said, there's some very similar things to health insurance, but it's kind of a niche market for church groups, gig workers, people that are self-employed that don't have access to health, the traditional health insurance, right?
Okay, awesome. So, why don't you take us back to to the beginning, I guess, when you joined OneShare, what problems they were facing, how they decided to roll out a CRM system decided on Salesforce, right? That whole getting started process.
Yeah. So when I got to OneShare, it had recently just gotten started. It was a startup. They were using some, I don't even remember the name, but some old antiquated system of CRM. And they were looking to move to something that was a little bit more robust, something that gave some more reporting and something that did better tracking of customers and their sales team. And so one of their C-suites, I worked with him previously, and he knew I was, working in the Salesforce space, and they wanted to move in that direction. So he gave me a call and said, "Hey, you mind coming in and talking to us, and let's see if we can make something work out, and you can help us get this, Salesforce installation up and running." So that's what we did.
Okay, awesome. So what were like the core goals of implementing Salesforce? Was it to drive sales? Was it marketing, customer service?
Actually, it's a little bit not weird, maybe a little bit strange. The main focus was recruiting salespeople, which they call brokers. So like a lot of the lead opportunity and accounts, flow was based off of bringing in different brokers from around the country, and the brokers in turn went out and actually did the sales. there were, there was tracking of customers and what plans and stuff they had in Salesforce, but the main focus was, and it's a reason that they moved to Salesforce, was to grow the broker space, the people that were out selling the plans for the company.
Okay, cool. So did that change, or did that how it stay?
Yeah, I think that's how it stayed. I mean, at the time that I left, it was still, focused on the broker and the whole broker experience. But I mean, the tracking of the customers and purchasing of the plans directly from the company, that was on a upward trajectory at the time. And I think they continued to build on that, so that, there was more focus on inside sales. That we had Pardot at the time. And so, marketing was doing campaigns to try to bring in customers directly, through their campaign efforts and through the web page, and not rely solely on the broker to go out and make the sales,
Okay,
which is
so
more
it wasn't
profitable in
just
the end, right?
right, of course, right. So it wasn't just recruiting the brokers, getting the brokers in, and then I guess enabling them to do sales. Okay, so did you guys how'd you guys measure success? Like, what are your core KPIs?
So yeah, we had area VPs, and they had certain metrics that they had to hit as far as how many brokers they had and how many sales they made. And then, of course, there's the compensation based on the number of sales and how long customers stay with you. And so I think that was the main driver of success, was the number of sales that were made by each team on a consistent basis.
So some very traditional sales rolls up to a VP. They are getting judged based on, or ranked based on,
Based
new
on
sales, and I guess,
Yeah.
and longevity. So it's like a very subscription-based model, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Recurring
the
fees.
model was subscription based. So someone could come on and this is one of the differences between this type of healthcare, not insurance, because not, but in providing healthcare payments and services. One of the difference between this and traditional insurance, because someone could literally come on today and sign up for a month, and then a month later be gone. Whereas traditional insurance, you get it through your employer, and then it's valid for the time that you're employed. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, 5 years, but you're kind of locked into that plan. Once you go through open enrollment and sign up. But with health share, you can sign up for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then stop.
Okay,
Got
cool.
it.
So yeah, go ahead, Kira.
So I just want to kind of go backwards a little bit to go forwards.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the selection process for Salesforce. What did that look like? Why did you choose Salesforce versus maybe other CRMs that are out there like Zoho, Blackboard, Bonterra, HubSpot? Some of these that have other kind of non-profit offerings. Why did you guys choose Salesforce?
When I got there, it had already, the contract had already been signed, and they already had it. It had been about a week, the first day that I started. But when I asked about it, I think one of the major drivers was the 10 free licenses, right? They're a nonprofit. It's a very well-known CRM. It's got the biggest market share. So I think the fact that they said, here are 10 licenses. If you want, you're a nonprofit, you can go to town with these. I think that was probably the main driver. But then second after that was probably the capabilities of what it could do, and how well it acts as a CRM, and the ease that we were able to take the customer base from the old CRM and import it into Salesforce. That was some of the first priorities that we had when when I got started. But I think, it was probably those two factors. First, they were given it free so they can get started. And then, just the reputation that Salesforce has as being, the top CRM in the world, basically.
Understood. And I guess in terms of the licenses that they gave OneShare, am I right in understanding it was more kind of Sales Cloud versus MPSP? And again, if it was, any reason why that was the case? Was it kind of pre-MPSP or?
Well, this was 2017 or 2018, I think. I started in 2019 there. So I think it was just, for the Sales Cloud factor. It was enough just for them to get started. And I think, I honestly, because they didn't have a Salesforce person when they started, like I said, I started like a week later. I think it was just on the recommendation of that same C-suite that I had worked with previously. And he recommended it because when we worked together previously, we worked in Salesforce. So he was used to that. He knew someone that knew a lot about Salesforce, which was me. So I think that more of the driver for this particular decision was kind of outside what, the traditional decision that you might make, what can it do and what functionality does it have? And it was more so, okay, I know someone that works with this system. I've used it before. And he was the kind of the main driver in making that decision. But I mean, that says a lot for Salesforce, right? Because it's something that we used previously in the company. It's like, hey, here's a startup. What do we want to use? It's like, hey, let's use Salesforce. So, it says a lot about Salesforce when you go somewhere else and you have a choice and you can say, let's do this or let's do that. And still the suggestion was to use Salesforce.
That's great. So an aspect of being, a known entity, previous use of Salesforce, the talent that was inside the business had that Salesforce expertise, the actual product capabilities. One being kind of the migration of previous legacy data, kind of CRM data to Salesforce, and then the icing on the cake was the free licenses to get you going. Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think they know that, right? They know that's going to pull in a lot of people. I've actually worked with just recently worked with a school in the Caribbean, and they were using basically spreadsheets and PDF documents to manage their school, their students and grades and all this. And my son actually worked there, and so I suggested to him to, have you guys looked at Salesforce to manage this? And he was like, well, no, not really. And then we presented it to them, right? So him and I, we sat down, we got a demo org, and we kind of built out a little bit of it to show them what it could do, because he's not Salesforce certified, my son, but he's pretty savvy and he's used it before. And we actually presented it to him, and they actually gave him a contract to build it out. So now they're using Salesforce. Yeah, that was pretty neat.
I hope they hope they got you on commission there.
Nah, it's my son, so he can take the money.
There you go.
I think you meant Salesforce.
Yeah, Salesforce. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go.
Discounted licenses on the back end.
Yeah. So
I looked into that, right?
Yeah.
So for our listeners, if you don't know, this is still a thing. If you're a nonprofit, Salesforce will give you 10 free licenses. I don't know the exact process. I don't know, Carlos, if you know that process, you just call them up and say, hey, I'd like my 10 free licenses, and you give them your nonprofit number or something.
Yeah. So there's actually a page you go to. Like, it was my first time helping him, to walk him through this process. But there's a page you go through. I think it's called Power of One. Power One or Power of Us, something like that. But then you go to the page and you register there. And then they ask for certain documents like your nonprofit and some other things. It goes to like whoever your area account exec is. There's one that covers all the Caribbean. So it went to him, and then he would get the licenses from Salesforce. and then an email would come, and then I think my son just had to click on a link, and then it started the whole installation process and the setup and all that. So it was fairly easy. I think the hardest part was maybe the document portion, making sure you have the right documents, and then somebody reviews it and comes back and checks it off as being good. But all in all, in all honesty, I think from the time that he started until the time that it was up and running and he could log in, it might have been 4 or 5 days.
Oh, wow. Super quick.
Pretty quick. Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Yeah, so for our listeners, we'll find that link. We'll put it in the podcast description for you. So if you want to sign up, it's there. Awesome. Yep. So Carlos, why don't you take us back to again towards the beginning, right? So now you're in place. You're leading this this project or this initiative. So how did you go about that, right? How did you plan this? How did you prioritize? What was your game plan?
Well, I don't know if you worked in a startup before, but prioritization, everything is prioritized when you're in a startup. So it was literally the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It was literally someone would come to my desk and say, "We need this field," and then it was just bang out the field and directly in production, right? And it was like that for a little while, just until it got to the point where, okay, we've got everything here that we're trying to track, as far as the brokers, because it was focused on brokers at the time in the beginning. But then simultaneously, I was given one rec to hire an admin, and then another, and ended up with, I think, 3 admins, 2 admins, 1 developer, and 1 QA/BA type person. But that was pretty much a start. Once the team got formed and things started slowing down, then we tried to kind of pump the brakes on the flybys, to your desk and say, "Hey, we need this today before the end of the day," and had to start to build out a process to release changes into the org. So I convinced them to go with Jira. So we started using Jira, and people would go in and put in, their requests. There was a customer service team that was built out. There was marketing that was built out. There was collections, and all these different teams were built out, and they were all in Salesforce. So, so we got Jira, and everyone would go to Jira and put in, whatever it was they wanted. We built out a 2-week sprint process, release dates, published all of that, and then basically got started from there.
So it sounds like it was very agile. You didn't put together a formal process. You kind of worked out your business processes at the same time you were building out Salesforce?
At the same time.
Because you guys were a startup.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which makes
and and the last thing that a CEO of a startup wants to hear is that, something is going to take 2 weeks. If it could be done in 20 minutes or 5 minutes, Some things in Salesforce are click a button, but if you take it through the whole development process, it might take you 2 weeks to click that button, right? But in the beginning, you have to be nimble. You have to move fast, and you just got to be ready to roll at any time. So
okay,
that's what we did.
Kind of 2 quick questions. You ever take a step back and say, let's get in proper DevOps, sandboxes, deployment procedures, that kind of stuff? And did you ever think about bringing in outside help, like a partner, or was this all in-house?
It was mainly in-house. Once things kind of slowed down a little bit to where it was more manageable, that's when I suggested that we go with Jira and also Capado. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Capado. We ended up going with Capado and built out all these sandboxes and built out a development pipeline. And each admin and each dev had their own sandbox. And now they were getting stories out of Jira, and they could work in their own sandboxes. And we use Capado to move things through the development pipeline to a merge sandbox, to QA, to UAT, and then releasing the production. We standardized that, and that worked well. That got things into more of a organized manner of doing things, rather than just willy-nilly throwing things into production without any proper testing or proper development.
Yeah. So Any issues getting that into a 2-week cycle? 'Cause it's kind of small, no? 2-week
What's
releases
that?
are tough, right? 2-week releases are tough, right? So if you're doing agile, 2-week releases, and you're going through the whole deployment process, any issues with that? How'd that work out?
No, before we, set up that development process, we took the 2 weeks and um, broke it down into how many days we needed for development and how many days we needed for QA and for testing and UAT, demos and things like that. And actually, we didn't have any issues with the 2-week sprint up front. It worked well. We were able to publish release dates at the end of each sprint, so people knew, if I've got this project, like customer service has some project going on, and they need us to build out, some case types in the service service cloud to, for whatever is happening, customers are going to start calling in about something. But they knew that, hey, there's a release date at the end of this 2-week cycle, or at another, and so they were able to work off of that, and actually it didn't present any problems to us, basically.
I just want to ask a question about the team and planning the team and kind of how that journey looked like. So you start off with 10 licenses. You were there 2.5 years. When you finished, roughly how many licenses did you have in the org?
Wow. Yeah. Well, we started off with the 10 licenses. I think when I got there, and I got my license, I was license number 11. So they actually had to call Salesforce and say, okay, we need another license. So I think that's when they first started paying for licenses when I came on board. But we ended up with maybe 300 or so licenses by the time I left, 2.5 years.
Good. So solid growth. Because a question I often get asked, but by first-time Salesforce customers who are a couple of years in, growing their org, when should I hire support? What should that skill set be? Should it be admin? Should it be development? Right? Should it be the QAs that you mentioned you got? Should it be a business analyst? Should it be a combination of the two? And obviously Salesforce generally advise every 100 to 150 users, depending on how complex your org is with integrations, etc. You want one kind of full-time designated resource, right? So I guess based on that model, you had a team of 5 at its highest point, with around 300-ish users. Some might say that was maybe a bit top heavy, in terms of more resources are needed based on the Salesforce recommended guideline. But I think it's important to note that you weren't just doing Salesforce, right? You were doing integrations with things like NetSuite as well, as part of that.
What is the Salesforce recommended guideline of admins or devs to users?
So it changes, but roughly, and we can include this in the link as well. But generally, it's around one full-time, 40-hour a week resource per 150 users. 100 to 150 is one. And then they rank it based on complexity of the org, and so on. But generally, rule of thumb, every 100 to 150 users, they recommend one full-time resource.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before, so that's interesting.
Yeah, you learn something new every day, so we'll include that.
So basically, I need to go to my current boss and ask for a head count.
There you go. But again, this was kind of this pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah, I started with OneShare pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Maybe 8-10 months before the pandemic.
Yeah. And you were on site in Dallas. So how I guess being a non-profit, were there any challenges that differed to kind of being in the commercial space, be it budget restraints, be it attracting individuals that were interested in non-profits, anything that was kind of different from your experience working in the commercial sector?
I think the biggest difference was that things moved faster.
Really?
Decisions were made faster, which isn't always a good thing, because something pops up and like literally someone could go to the CEO and say, we've got to have this, whatever, and he'd be like, you really need that? It's like, yeah, all right, and he'd sign off and we'd have it. And, we'd end up with things that we thought were great that worked, for a minute or two. And then it just sat there for the rest of the year, while we waited for the contract to run out. But things like that happen a lot. Things move very fast. Decisions are made very fast in a startup. And I think, they're still in business. It's not like they're out of business, but I think some startups don't do well because they make decisions too fast and then end up wasting a lot of money and not being able to survive.
It's interesting because I know the stereotype is non-profit, public sector. Generally moves slower. Decisions take a long time. Maybe there's budget challenges that they have to overcome. But and on the contrary, startups fail fast mentality, right? But I think it is interesting, particularly from a tech standpoint. We've certainly seen some non-profits are at the forefront of tech because they get so many discounts on licenses or access to trials and things like that, right? So sometimes for an individual looking to get exposure to new systems and technologies, non-profits isn't a bad choice to make by any means. And some of the biggest Salesforce customers are in that kind of non-profit public sector space. So interesting there. In terms of, I guess, along that 2.5-year journey, outside of the concept of the startups and the non-profit, outside of that, anything that kind of was unexpected when you were kind of going through this kind of growth period and getting more users on Salesforce? Any kind of surprises or unexpected challenges that you saw through that process?
Well, the first surprise was that when I got there, and I had found out that they had Salesforce for about a week when I got there, was that they didn't have anyone that knew Salesforce.
Big shock.
So the big shock. I think some girl learned how to put fields on a page layout, and so they would tell her, put this field here and put this field there, and so she was doing that. But I think that was the biggest shock. The other thing I think was probably the fact that the development process or the development cycle, hadn't really been thought about. Maybe there wasn't a ton of experienced people that would have in the beginning said, okay, hey, when we start developing here, this is what we need to do. We need to, adopt agile methodology or something. So not only was I doing Salesforce and leading a Salesforce team and trying to build out a brand new installation, which, by the way, probably 90% of admins never see one from scratch. And I was fortunate in that company to see two from scratch because they had a partner company that said, oh, you guys are doing great with Salesforce. Can you help us with that? And so the CEO had us delegate so many hours a week to building out a second Salesforce installation in another company simultaneously. But, just that it was surprising not having that experience where someone said, here's what we need to do and here's how we need to map it out. And it was really just make fast decisions and send someone an email and say, hey, I need this. And I don't want to say it was unorganized. It was just very fast. And with me, that's okay. But I saw the need that we need to slow it down. So I had to build out some things that I would have thought that would have already been there, like, Jira ticketing system for taking in work or changes or whatever, a sprint process and a testing process and all that stuff. I didn't think I was going to have to do that. I would have thought that that was there and I was just going to concentrate on Salesforce, but had to do all of that in the beginning. So that was a little bit of
just a startup, man. You got to do everything.
You wear a lot of hats in a startup.
Yeah.
Everybody wears a lot of hats.
Right. So this is back 2017, 2018, you said, right? The Salesforce market was
19.
hotter then. 19. Yeah, even better. So the Salesforce market was definitely hotter then. Nonprofits, at least the job market, right? Nonprofits, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not even me, but the reputation is that they tend to have lower budgets. And in the Salesforce ecosystem, sometimes let's just say people don't want to work there. They think that they're not going to pay as well. Any issues? I mean, I don't know if you agree with that assessment. That tends to be the sentiment. So any issues attracting talent, and how did that kind of play?
So it's funny that you asked that question, because normally in a startup, and I haven't worked in another startup before, but that was my understanding, that the budgets were low, and to get things,
not the startup, it's the nonprofit that I'm saying.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, nonprofit. Budgets are lower because and they're always looking, software, whatever, for discounts, just because it's nonprofit, right? But in this particular case, I don't want to get into specifics about health share or one share in specific, but it was very cash flow heavy. So financial decisions were not difficult, and that can be good, but then that can be bad. And in this case, sometimes it was good, and I think, in my opinion, sometimes it was bad.
How is that ever bad?
How is it bad?
Yeah, how can that be bad?
Okay, so how could it be bad? Because on any given day, someone could, like I said, go to the CEO and say, hey, we need this. And you go, and like I said, I don't want to get into specifics, right? But we could sit down with a vendor and they could say, okay, this is going to cost you $40,000 a year. And then he's like, okay, do it. And then, 2-3 weeks later, realize, okay, that's not really what we need. We really need something else. And we're probably not going to use that, but we already paid it for the year. So then it just sits there. Nobody uses it. And another decision is made a few weeks later to get the next latest and greatest. It was afforded the opportunity to do that. And that's not always a good thing.
So I think it goes back to your going too fast.
Going too fast.
Right. It kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously that's right. That's one of your strongest lessons learned, right?
Yes.
Think it through, let's say, right?
Think it through.
And speed to market maybe is not everything. So what else, man? What else did you learn? Or any interesting anecdotes that really taught you a good, solid lesson?
I think that's where I learned to voice a little bit more. So up until that point, just kind of a little history on me. Up to that point, I had been admin for a while. I had been senior admin for a while. And this being a startup and them not having anyone that had Salesforce and knowing one of the C-suites, this was my first opportunity to actually lead a Salesforce instance, right? So this was my first director role. And I think I did a good job. But I had to learn to, I think probably by the time I left, learn to speak up a little bit more, to take charge a little bit more and voice my opinion a little bit more. I probably didn't do that enough in some instances, probably until a little bit later down the line as I got a little bit more comfortable. But, that was a huge lesson for me, because in other areas of my life, like I'm a former Marine, right? I've never had any issues telling someone what I thought or being outspoken or anything. But I probably held back a little bit, I think, just because it was my first instance that I was actually in charge of, and didn't want to cause too many waves, although I could see things move very fast. Maybe they should slow down, or some things they move fast enough and we should speed up, I think that was a big lesson. Communication, being a little bit more outspoken.
So are you talking about like to senior higher ups,
Yes.
your boss? Or are you talking about? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if you were talking about, sometimes to underlings. I
Subordinate?
know I have this issue to underling people who report to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I have this issue. Something like me, I give them, because that's how you learn, right? You give them a long leash, let's say.
Yeah.
Because you want them to learn and to try things and potentially fail, because sometimes the lesson from the failure is more valuable to their growth, right?
Yeah.
Than the impact of the failure. So I wasn't sure if you were, which way you were going.
Yeah. It was definitely up the chain.
Right.
To my direct reports, it was never an issue. The nice thing in that being the first, like my first director role, my first role, I had direct reports in the Salesforce ecosystem. I was able to hire everyone, so the interaction, the rapport, and everything was built from scratch, and we learned things together, and so we gelled as a unit. I've had a couple of roles since then where I've gone into a place where my direct reports were already there before I got there, so it's a different kind of vibe, it's a different atmosphere. But there, no issues down, but I think I probably could have been a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more vocal in the beginning, up the chain, which it got better as time went on. But like I said, it was my first time. So,
do you think people talk about imposter syndrome, right? And the sense of belonging and feeling maybe a bit outside your comfort zone. It sounds like that was a factor for you. That was something you were experiencing in that moment, right? Like,
that played a big role in it, because it was the first time. It was like, okay, how strongly do I make this suggestion to my boss or to his boss, if he asked me something, or, if something comes from above that's recommended and I know that this is probably not the best idea, and do I speak up? Am I qualified to speak up? Should I speak up? All those questions pop up into your head,
I've got two follow-on questions for you, just on the topic of leadership, and we'll move on. The first is around your leadership style. The 6 years you spent with the Marines, give or take a couple of months, right? Did you take any of your learnings in the Marines and apply that to your management career, both at OneShare and then the subsequent years you've led teams? Anything that you took from being in that environment to technology?
Yeah, I think probably because I was in for 6 years, so I got up to the rank of sergeant. So I think delegating tasks to subordinates, or in this case, direct reports, and then trusting that they're going to be able to fulfill them without micromanaging them. That was something that I took from the military. And another thing that surprisingly that I took, that I saw when I got to kind of corporate America, something I learned when I was in the military that I took with me is that there's a human aspect to managing people. Yes, there are numbers, yes, there are goals, yes, there are SLAs and all that stuff, but there's a human aspect, right? Things happen. You've got all these different different people, different backgrounds, different cultures, different situations. Some people have kids, some people don't, and you have to have a human touch to managing people. It's not all about the numbers.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. In terms of people that are making that journey today, right? They've led orgs, they've built orgs from scratch. I see this a lot in the ecosystem as well. Making that transition to leadership from a Salesforce perspective, let's focus there. Or in general, actually, were there any kind of tools or books or kind of, podcasts, articles, knowledge centers that helped you in that journey of kind of individual contributor to management that you found particularly useful that's worth sharing?
Wow. So I hate to say it, but for that particular question, I'm probably not the best example. What I kind of, just like a lot of admins, I just kind of happened upon Salesforce and then became an admin, and then just through my journey became, senior admin. But I think part of what got me to the management level was my experience when I was in the military, because, I managed teams in the military. So I think just that natural ability to work with people and to bring people together and accomplish goals and to be able to delegate work and to be that responsible party. I think that just naturally took me there. When that first opportunity popped up, I wasn't looking. I got a call from my friend that I worked with previously, and so he thought that I would be good, and maybe he saw something in me back when I was a senior admin and thought, hey, he'd probably be good for leading this. But I think it was that. If I had to suggest to someone, some YouTube videos or links to sites to go and how to get from individual contributor to running a Salesforce instance, I'm probably not the best example, unfortunately.
No worries.
Because it did happen for me that way.
Yeah. Well, there's no better experience than doing it. You've been doing it in real time, right? And doing the job itself, right? I think learning by doing is probably one of the best ways.
Yeah, for sure. And then just before I took that role, I was always like in grooming meetings and in requirement gathering, I was always the one asking questions and making suggestions and looking for ways to solve problems. And I was very outspoken on that. When we did work together, he and I, he saw some of that. So maybe that helped a little bit. That's me naturally, right?
Yeah, I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I think you're just a little bit too humble, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word. So Steve Jobs, I think it was Steve Jobs, he says the best managers are individual contributors who stepped up because no one else could manage. I think you kind of fit that description, right? You really knew your stuff, and they pushed you into a management position, and you clearly have the empathy, right, to be to be a good manager. So putting that aside, what about the other component of managing is, right? So you have, right, your seniors, and you have your so your juniors, the people that report to you. But what about managing the business and their expectations? Any struggles there, right? Because obviously, right, you have to prioritize. You might have to tell one team no, or say, next sprint.
And I think as well, to tag on to this question, especially without covering a whole episode on just this topic, but especially navigating the pandemic at this time, right? You've got a new team, 8-9 months, right? You're finding your feet, and the pandemic hits, and then going back to your point about empathy, etc. It's just a wild time, right? So that piece as well would be interesting.
Yeah, also potentially switching to remote.
Yeah. Well, the good thing in when we went to the remote thing, I had worked remote before. So, I was used to working remote. Now, managing people remotely, I had never done before. But I had worked remote before. So really for me, that wasn't a big issue. When I moved from Atlanta to Dallas and I was going to the office in one share, it was new again for me going back to the office. So when the pandemic hit and I went back to working from home, it was like back to normal for me. But I think one of the challenges in that particular, like in one share with the managing portion, so it was great. Like I built my team from scratch. So I got to know them very well, and we got like very close. We gelled very well together. I think maybe when things started to get more formalized and things started to ramp up, trying to draw that fine line again. Okay, yes, we get along well, but I'm your boss. This needs to be done by Friday. Little things like that. I mean, it was never an issue, but then those things present challenges, and you have to sometimes you have to be the bad guy, I guess. I don't know how else to say it, but I mean, you have things that you have to, people you have to respond to, SLAs that you have to hit. In the beginning, it was just whenever we could do things, and then it kind of got to the point where, okay, this has to be delivered, this has to be delivered, and it was just one thing after the other. So pushing, going from, hey, we're kind of hanging out and getting stuff done and having a good time, to start pushing to produce, to deliver, making that transition. Again, it was the first time I was leading a Salesforce instance. So that presented a little bit of a challenge. Not huge, but a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So in terms of, fast forward to present day, you've got another kind of 4 or 5 years under your belt, both in leadership, but also Salesforce. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently in terms of actual implementation of success? It could be team building, but any kind of, if you had to tell Carlos of 4 or 5 years ago, what would you tell him in terms of navigating this new project or hiring or whatever it might be?
I think I probably would do like you guys were asking me, what I suggest to people to, that are thinking about moving from kind of the individual contributor into actually leading Salesforce instance or anything else that they might be working on. I would do more research. I would talk to more people in the space. Like I have my old boss when I was a admin, that if this didn't happen so fast, where I went from, senior admin to director, I think I probably would have been talking to him over time and tell me how you got there, and what resources would you suggest to me, do my own Google searches and look for resources online and kind of read up, and I probably would have spent, and I probably would tell myself at Dreamforce, because I've been to many Dreamforces, and I'm going next week. Actually, I'm flying out in the morning. I think tomorrow's Monday.
Yeah.
I'm flying out in the morning. But I would say talk to some people that are doing it, and ask questions. And
I think the biggest takeaways I get from listening to you is being naturally. I don't know if I can pronounce the word right. Well, you ask a lot of questions in general, right? You're it begins with I. What's the word?
Inquisitive.
Inquisitive.
Yes.
Naturally inquisitive.
Inquisitive.
And curious, right? I once was told by a former manager. Sometimes you're always like a detective, right? You always want to ask the hows, whys, why are we doing this? What do you want from the end goal out of this? And talk about that transition to leadership. I think this ecosystem is unlike any other period in terms of like the Ohana. You could send a message to 50 directors, and I guarantee at least half of them would reply back to you. Like you would reply to someone if they reached out. Hey, Carlos, I saw you make the transition. Can I grab 5 minutes of your time? Right, being proactive and seeking help. This ecosystem really will give back. So I would stress what you mentioned, because I know people are out there willing to help, right? Whether it's user groups, whether it's just being brave and sending someone a DM, right, and going for it.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember or not, but one of the meetups that we did, that was actually kind of the thing that I was talking about, and I had quite a few people asking questions at that meetup. But there was one guy, don't ask me his name, I forgot his name because we haven't actually talked in a little while. But for a few months after that, he hit me up on LinkedIn, every couple of weeks or so, and would ask questions and, hey, what do you think I should do here? How should I do this? What do you think about this opportunity? And, I probably told him more than he expected me to tell him. But for me, Salesforce has been great for my life, for my professional development. And I want to pass that on. Because why I passed it on to my son, and then he ended up, having his own Salesforce instance in a school in the Caribbean. But I want to pass it on because I want someone else to be able to do what I did, basically. So that, for me, that's a measure of success. Did I help somebody else move on, move forward, move up, get better? If I did, even one person, then I'm successful.
Love it. And then just going back to the implementation, whilst you're kind of in this moment of reflection, going back to the implementation of Salesforce for OneShare, were there any kind of light bulb moments where it just kind of made sense? It kind of clicked. It was like, here we go. This is we've made it. We've been successful. We did it the right way. It kind of clicked together.
If there was a moment, yeah, probably the moment was when this email came out and said, okay, nobody has access to the old CRM anymore. You're now, 100%, because they were kind of swivel chairing between the two as we were building out and migrating and stuff. I think the moment when that email went out that everyone's access to the old CRM was gone and you don't do anything else anyway, now everything is in Salesforce, and then nothing fell apart. No one, lost their mind, and no one came over to my desk because, we weren't remote at that time, but no one came over to my desk with a bat and started beating me over the head. This thing doesn't work. It was nice to be confident enough in the system to know that if we built it right, it was going to work. And that's what happened. So
scale of 1 to 10, nice, easy one. Scale of 1 to 10, how happy were you with the outcome? 10 being elated, couldn't have done anything better, 1 being terrible.
I would say 8.
Okay.
Because I think, I don't know if I'd ever say 10. And I know it wasn't close to 10, so I wouldn't say 9. So I would say 8, because there's always room for improvement. And maybe some things were improved after I left. Just kind of the natural progression, right? As business continues, you see more things you need to do more things. So you can always improve. But no matter what you do, the beauty of Salesforce is that there's 100 ways to do the same thing, right? Yeah, that. I lost my train of thought for a minute there, but yeah.
Solid 8. That's good.
Yeah.
Solid 8.
Right, but with no room for improvement.
Yeah, room for improvement always.
Yeah, I know. So we always like to kind of wrap up with, where do you see the future of Salesforce, of the CRM industry, maybe of the healthcare and nonprofit space? Where do you think things going, and what are you most excited about?
Personally, I see, I know there's always ups and downs. 1 year they laid off a few hundred people, or 1,000 or 2,000, I don't know. And then, the next year they're hiring. I think Salesforce is here to stay, and I think it's going to maintain for some time. It's going to maintain market share. And still to this day, I recommend any young person or even old person. My sister is about to retire. I already got my son into Salesforce, but my sister's about to retire, and she wants to do something and work from home. And I said, you should think about Salesforce. But I think it's going to be around for a while. The fact that it's been iterated so much to the betterment of a lot of companies, I think that speaks a lot about it. It's definitely going to continue to provide a way of life for a lot of young people. One of the things I absolutely love about Salesforce, you don't need to go to college. You know, there's a lot of young people out there, they don't want to go to college. Oh, if you don't want to go, then don't go. There's careers that you can get into and not have a college degree, like Salesforce. I don't have a college degree, but you know, I've been director of CRM technology, director of Salesforce, VP of technology, and all of it is due to Salesforce. So, you know, I think it's going to be around for a while. I think it's going to do a lot of good things for a lot of people. It may have its ups and downs, but I think it's on a good trajectory.
So it's interesting you say that, because I think more recently, in maybe the past few months, very, very recently, this is a very recent thing that I've been hearing, is it's getting too big and too complex, and it's harder to get into it. And some people think the days of the accidental admin are coming to an end. Like, you're not just going to stumble into it. I think it might have to do with Data Cloud. It's a really complex product, and a lot there. So what are your thoughts on that? People are just getting a little nervous, or any truth to it?
No, I think there's some truth to it. I mean, as it grows, it's more difficult, and I think, like I've had a couple of admins that were in previous jobs actually were Salesforce admins before they even got certified. I think those days are closer to being over. I think it's or the accidental admin, those days are short. I think you have to make a conscious effort. I mean, even now, I think if you're thinking about getting into it, you should make a conscious effort to do it, right? You've got to do research. You've got to do studying. You've got to get the certifications. You have to stay up to date on new things, you know, AI and all this other stuff that's happening. So I think it will be a little bit harder. But I think Salesforce recognizes that that the accidental admin is probably part of the foundation of the reason that, you know, it's as successful as it is now. And I think, you know, if it gets to the point where it's too difficult to be an accidental admin, that maybe they make some adjustments, you know, to help. You know, they have like something I didn't even know they had, but a buddy of mine is actually part of it, is the Salesforce military. Don't know what it's called, but like to help.
Like a vet force, I think it's called.
Yeah. So
force.
like, I'm a vet. He's a vet, and it actually helped him. Here's a crazy thing: is he was my boss. He was my boss at the company that I went to where I first discovered Salesforce and then became a Salesforce admin. And he's just reinvented himself because the industry we were in at that time when he was my boss is kind of dying. And I helped him get certified. So that, you know, that for me was like the greatest thing in the world. It was like my former boss. I helped him for like, I don't know, 6, 8 months, 10 months to get ready for becoming a Salesforce admin. Now he's a, you know, certified Salesforce admin. But I think, you know, there will continue to be opportunities. It might get a little bit harder, but I think Salesforce knows that they have to continue to help us so that it can be enticing to all these other companies that don't have it, that could benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think the barrier to entry is obviously it's a bit more of my world. The barrier to entry is a little bit higher for sure. I think we're already seeing merging of roles. So companies are now not only looking for an admin, they're looking for an admin with strong business analysis skill sets. You know, or they're looking for devs that can also articulate themselves to the business, right? And not just be a hands-on keyboard resource that there might have been 2-3 years ago, right? They're looking for more, dare I say it, jack of all trades in terms of roles, and individuals that jump onto that quickly will continue to thrive and grow, right? Alongside the continuous development, the continued certs, networking, etc. Right? they'll be in a good spot. But I think the days of just kind of having these siloed 100% roles are changing. Obviously, we go to Dreamforce next week. This episode will air a little bit after, but Agentforce, right? That is going to have to, that will change people's responsibilities. They're going to have to adapt, right? It's going to take away some of those those admins who focus more on the service side, right? It's going to reduce some of their day-to-day, so they will have to make that pivot to new skill sets, right? To be project managers, to be BAs, maybe to learn broader integration, tools like MuleSoft, for example, right? To continue to demonstrate their value to an org. So it's interesting times. Some might say, 20 years on, maybe it's time for a little bit of a shake-up, right? Inject some new ideas and blood into the ecosystem. But I think if you want something, you will get it, right? If it's I don't want to put it's meant to be or meant to be, that's more like, oh, you had good luck. I don't believe in good luck personally. You make your own luck, right? If you're adamant you want to be an admin, you'll be a goddamn admin, right? So I think I get asked that question all the time, and it goes down to how much you really want it, right? Because it might take you 12, 18 months to get that first shot, but there is a ton of inputs that you can make to get there, right? It's not impossible. So thanks, Carlos, for your time today. We really appreciate having you on the show.
That's great being here.
I hope you had fun, and I'm sorry to say the Cowboys are still trailing behind.
Oh, no. Well, then it's better we did it during the game. This is probably less stressful than the game.
Probably. Safe travels to Dreamforce, and
you'll be there, right?
I'll be there. We'll
okay. I'll look for you when I'll be there tomorrow morning, actually.
Yeah, we'll get a well-deserved beer and maybe we'll FaceTime you, Maz, once we're there to say hello. But for our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring inspiring leaders like Carlos, who are shaping the future as well as the present for CRM. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for the latest updates and exclusive content. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and we hope to have you tune in soon.